Hello and welcome to a special BlizzCon edition of The Nines presented by AT&T. Today we're going to talk everything about BlizzCon, what was announced, dish our hot takes, and later we'll even talk to Overwatch League pro Jake. I'm one of your hosts, Frodan. It's good to be back. And joining me are Thorn and Monte Cristo, who've been holding it down with summoning insight. So we replaced one flamboyant Asian with another, so 1-to-1. Okay. This time we can talk about Blizzard stuff. How was summoning insight for you, Monte?
Exactly. So it's not really a one-to-one. It's not really a one-to-one trade.
Exactly.
I mean, it's been fun.
Wow, he's not even here to defend himself.
It's the best time.
Yeah, exactly. He wouldn't defend himself anyway.
Yeah, he wouldn't anyway. No.
Let's just jump straight into it and leave Loco to rest for a little bit. Diablo 4, the long-awaited fourth installment of the Dungeon Crawler RPG will be available. What did you guys think of the cinematic and gameplay trailers they show off?
I mean, I thought the cinematic was one of, if not the best I've actually ever seen from Blizzard. It's incredibly impressive what they can do. But really, it's the return to more of the violent, like dark, arcane nature that I really like about what we've seen so far from this game, because I thought Diablo 3, as I started playing Diablo 1, and as a child, I think many gamers have a very vivid memory of Diablo 1, like the first time you see the Butcher.
Sure.
And like you open that door, it's all the dismembered corpses, and like it was genuinely frightening. And I think that's like one of the most powerful moments I've had in gaming, period. And I would like a return to that. So hopefully that's what we get.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't care about cinematics anyway. People know that, like I don't care. But I will say, like I'm not a big like single player gamer generally. I don't play a lot of the modern games. Did play the original Diablo and a bit of Diablo 2 though. And I will say that's something that put me off Diablo 3 when it came out. Is it felt to me like it wasn't about the atmosphere of the game. It was like people were playing it as a mindless dungeon crawl. And they were just wanted to just complete the game basically. Like it wasn't like the I always thought the atmosphere in Diablo 1 was very cool actually.
Yes.
And I'll say as well, the reason why, even if you're not, this isn't specifically an esports topic, but the reason why I think it's a big deal that this genre continues is because to Western players like me who only play the odd game, Diablo's the big game, but that genre is huge. Like anytime we were ever in Asia, particularly in Korea, every game being advertised on those subways, Baldur's Gate or something, even like the sort of mixture between, yeah, it's that, because they've kind of done like the mixture of the photorealism, but still like very clearly fantasy cartoon element. Like they've nailed that line very, very well, I think.
Diablo 3, so it feels much more visceral. I mean, the Butcher when he comes to one, so hopefully it'll go in that vein.
To follow up on some of the things that you were saying, Monty, as a fan of the early years of Diablo franchise, what do they need to do from your perspective to win you back? Because there were so many Diablo 2 fans that were turned off by Diablo 3.
Well, again, I think the talent trees are a good thing, but I think one aspect is people talk about kind of the gore of, or like the cartoony nature of Diablo 3, but I actually think what was most core to the experience that I had in Diablo 1 and 2 was sort of this sense of isolation that you got when you played the game. Like it felt like you against the world, and it felt like you were just sort of like adrift and alone in this really messed up world. And I think that's what was sort of lacking with Diablo 3 is like I didn't really have that same sense of sort of terrifying isolation, which I thought the first two games did much better.
And I felt like for me, combat used to matter so much in Diablo 2, how you dodge and how you engage things. Diablo 3, you're just like basically invincible. You grab them into a corner, and you just try to do one spell to kill everything. And I feel like Diablo 4 might be returning back to that. So really hype. I think a lot of people are looking forward to hearing more, so we'll reserve further judgment until then. Meanwhile, the second biggest news coming out of BlizzCon was the unveiling of Overwatch 2, the worst kept secret in that universe. A new hero was introduced, a new PvE mode, and it was even playable on the show floor with Overwatch celebrating its 5th year anniversary. There's next-gen consoles on the way at the end of 2020, so a lot of people are asking, Monty, do you think this was the perfect time to announce a sequel?
I mean, sure. They don't have a release date yet, so we don't really know when it's coming out. I personally am interested in the PvE stuff because I think that for a competitive title, Overwatch's like lore and universe is actually probably the most compelling of any competitive title I've ever seen. And so, maybe besides StarCraft, but that had a single player campaign. This is just truly a competitive title. StarCraft 1, not 2. Anyway.
Yeah, I was like, we're going to
launch with any kind of PvE experience or single player experience. It has very good and a but I don't really know where this goes for me in terms of Overwatch League competitive stuff. Because yeah, we're getting a new game mode, but my concern is that, is this going to translate into Overwatch League viewers if people are primarily purchasing the game for PvE?
Right.
which I think many people will. So how is this going to like buttress the competitive scene would be my question. So I hope we see.
Here's what you think from a person outside of that. Like Monty, of course, invested into the Overwatch League viewership. What do you think? What worries you? What do you like about it?
It's funny because what I noticed a lot of people enjoyed about this, and it's why we're going to have that segment later, the click debate about is it a true sequel or is it an expansion, basically, is it retains a lot of what was Overwatch. Like, it doesn't look like a radically different game. I actually feel like that might be a mistake because I often say to people, if you're somebody who thinks the Overwatch League is going to get bigger and bigger and the viewership's going to go up and it's going to succeed,